I was interested with the poll that a lot of people indicated that they struggled with identifying whether spiritual gifts were actually gifts or if they were character flaws. For example, I'm quite opinionated and articulate, and I was frequently told to be seen and not heard, you're one voice amongst five, or, let the boys have a go. Do you guys have any experiences that shaped how you see God or how you see faith around those sorts of challenges where a gift or a talent has been seen as a flaw because you're a woman?
What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, just being assertive and standing up for yourself. Like, don't do that. Like, if you aren't being sweet, then it's your fault when someone's upset with you, and that's just nonsense.
It's that thing. It comes down to that. I think our church as a whole is confused about the difference for both genders between the role that Jesus is supposed to play in what you do and the role that you yourself play. Because on the one hand, you're told that Jesus gives you these gifts, but on the other hand, you're told that none of it is you and that Jesus works through you and all the good things that Jesus is working through you. And I think that's a muddled up message for everyone that I really think gets pushed hard on women.
Yeah.
In society.
You think it's harder on women? You think it's harder on women than men?
I do. I was talking to a former teacher of mine at church today, and she's still teaching at the school, and she's injured her leg really badly. She's had surgery. She's just come back to work with 2 weeks off. She's still on an electronic cart that takes her around the school, and she's been given extra classes to teach on Monday. She got an email telling her she'd be covering extra lessons, and she was talking to me about the fear of writing in and saying, no, I can't do it. Because the expectation is that she will do what she is told and be a team player, and the way that she'll be perceived, or trying to put herself first and her healing first on an injury that she sustained at school under work cover. That work cover has said she can't do extra classes, and just even being able to voice that for herself isn't nice, isn't sweet, as Sarah says.
Yeah.
And she feels about how to take care of her own health.
Yeah. That reminds me of an experience I had when I was quite young. I was only about 20, 21, and I was a student nurse at the time, and I was doing, I was the camp nurse for the summer camps. And a couple of girls came to me and disclosed some domestic violence issues. And I knew that by law I was required to report it, even if I wasn't yet a registered nurse. So naturally I went to the organisers and I said, this is the problem, this is what I have to do. And it actually turned into a serious issue because they didn't want me to report it, even though as ministers or teachers they were also required to report it. So that same thing about having to have a voice and fight an issue and being dismissed and told that that's not it, like that fear of actually speaking up and saying, I need to do this to protect people. I need to not be silent. Like you're talking about your friend with her health. She needs to protect herself and she can't because she's so afraid. And I felt that I needed to protect those girls. But again, I was being told by the church and the patriarchy, no, you can't. You're not in charge here. And I found
that's a terrible one.
It was really quite excruciating, and I did end up calling docs anyway. But it is something that if you're trained to be sweet, if you're trained to, even if you voice your opinion, to then accept a no and be quiet, I think every day you face those challenges, and they might seem small, but even the small ones, I don't know about you guys, but they almost make me panic. Even just the small things, like I'm getting my ears pierced, just about made me panic, let alone something as serious as I don't think this girl should go home from camp. Yeah.
That's a shocking one. Oh, that's nauseating because there's so many things about childhood and the youth to age like the hierarchy of employment, the government requirements, the moral requirements to support children who've disclosed to you. That should not be a conflict. Trust me.
No.
Oof. I don't know. It also, for me, like what you just brought up is important too, because we're trained to do things for the rest of our lives. Like, I don't know about the rest of you, but in my personal life, I'm not quiet. I'm not submissive. I'm not, I've said this, I'm 6 foot tall and I have big hair and big earrings and big, I'm floating and all those things. And I speak, I talk in every other area of my life. And then when I get to church, it actually creates this false thing where the church isn't letting me be authentically who I am, because to do that, I'm disrupted in that environment. And it's so, people talk about the falseness of people who speak morally one way at church and then live a different life outside church. But I honestly think that the gender expectations do exactly the same things without sin even being part of it. If I can't be real in church, if I can't be myself, it comes back to the thing about spiritual gifts. And your gifts are fine as long as you give them to children's Sabbath school and meeting out.
Yes.
In those roles, but not theological discussions.
No.
Yeah.
I really identify with that, because my reaction was to become almost invisible as far as who I really am in my church and my family. So I was very much putting on a role. And I think that's part of why I left, because I was becoming so empowered in my career, studying law and being successful in a broader society, that I could not get back in my box anymore. But I've always tended to cope, I think, by trying to be as invisible as possible until something breaks, until something just tips me over the edge and I have to have a bit of a tanty. But it's hard. How do we address that? Because there's nothing worse than being told that you're being pig-headed or shrill, or having someone say, I think you're really cute, but you're too intense. How do you actually deal with that?
I don't know. I guess I felt genuinely so diminished every time I've tried to speak publicly. And the church that I go to, women preach. Like, it's not actually uncommon for women to speak, for women to take the sermons, to do that kind of thing. But I know that my local church is not necessarily typical in that regard, and I think that's not a big school church. It's certainly not been my experience that I could get equal airtime in those kind of discussions, and that people, when I try, their assumptions are so patronising and infuriating.
What do you think makes it?
Sorry, I was just saying, just this year, I've had occasion to be debating something with a pastor, and said directly to him, I am militant. I use these words, I am militant, I am working on this, I am doing it and coming for this. Like, very aggressively. And I actually literally got a pat on the hand and got told, you're too nice, too gentle. And I am nice. I'm nice. And that does not mean I'll come for you. I will.
Yes, exactly.
Being confrontational. Do you think it's
like I'm too nice? I'm way too nice. But
I know, and then you get that weird thing, don't you, where that your face is doing one thing and your brain is doing something else entirely. Just
you've got so many comebacks, but you start crying instead.
Yes. I always cry when I'm angry.
What do you think makes
I've had like one experience of when I got angry about something with a situation, and people suddenly like made sure that what needed to happen happened, and I was like, wow, that felt amazing. Maybe but like it only happened once ever.
Yeah.
What do you think makes it worse in church? Because we know that in society women speak, it's about a 70-30 split between men and women professionally as far as speaking in meetings, even though the perception is that women talk too much. What do you think makes it so much worse in church? Do you think that's part of the biblical injunctions? Do you think that's a cultural hangover? Why is church so much worse than society?
I think it's a combination of the cultural stuff plus the headship thing, like the guys have to be on top and
Headship.
I don't know. They have to explain what God says to us because we don't have brains or something.
Headship and complementarianism. Those two things really bug me.
And I think that on top of the culture is what makes it so much worse.
Yeah. We've all seen, has everyone seen that meme that's been traveling around Facebook, and it's the Jesus umbrella and then the man umbrella and then there's the wife umbrella and then presumably the children have their own tinier umbrellas underneath. Like, what is this?
You said complementarianism. Do you mean like the separate but different? How Christians try to rationalize?
This idea that men and women were made for each other and therefore are in some ways different.
They try to say like you're equal but you're different. Like you have to stay home.
Which is a very valuable conversation like that.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible though to have that complementary but different idea in line with what's actually written in the Bible, where there is a clear, I don't want to get too theological, but some would say there is a clear hierarchy with, the husband being the head of the family as Christ is the head of the church. How have you guys reconciled that, or is it part of how do you deal with the specific words of patriarchy, I guess I should say, being dictated through such a fundamental source? Sorry, I just took that on a massive tangent on you, so I sprang that question.
I think it's at the core of it, because even where women are given a voice, there is a sense that they are being given a voice rather than have an equal birthright to speak. And it's that idea that people are somehow being generous or, progressive just by allowing women to speak. No, you didn't give me that. I've got that speaking part.
Yeah, it's like we've had 10 women preach this year. High five.
Yeah, I know. And people pointed out, like, aren't we awesome? And I'm like, well, what? Like, I genuinely think that. What? So, I think headship is a part of it. And it's that idea that, yes, like, I am giving you the gift of thinking that you have a voice. I'm giving you the gift of allowing you to speak in this space, even where it doesn't. And don't get me wrong, I am happy that so many more people are like that. I think that's awesome. But it's not equality.
Do you think it's a generational thing? Like, not to be completely horrible, but do you think that older Adventist men are more prone to this than perhaps our peers or those who are a bit younger? Like, do you think there may be a generational change?
This one's actually hard for me because my dad is the most gentle. My mum was, an ass-kicking woman. Like, she was the tough one, and my dad's super gentle. So he wanted to he got married in 1966 and he tried to take my mum's surname.
Oh.
Aww, I know, just of his own accord. And so in my family, he'd take us aside and tell me two things. You're so beautiful, you should be a model. And number two, women can do anything. Like these were actually the secret messages that he used to give us. And yet, as a teacher, the people that I notice staying in Adventism are this weird conservative throwback who don't, like, I'm not seeing an awful lot of progressive kids staying in the church. And so that generational thing is difficult for me. They look at, like, I don't know if you have it in America, but there's this real hipster Christian phenomenon here where, like, they all have little beards and, like, caps and, like, Mumford and Sons lighting and whatnot, but they are super conservative in a way that I'm like, you really don't think I should be speaking in the church, and you are like,
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought maybe partly because I grew up within, like, on the fringe of that really conservative, like, group of people, because my parents were, like, with them, and then after I was born, they kind of went to a mainstream church, but I feel like most of the younger people I've met are super conservative, and I wasn't sure whether that was because that's kind of where we were, but yeah, I would agree with you though.
Yeah, I feel like they leave.
Yeah.
I think in my experience,
Yeah, I mean, I left. So.
Yeah, Dorinda.
I mean, they don't want me because I'm gay, so.
Yeah. It's worse.
In my experience, my dad's very traditional, but he's always respected what I have to say. Although he has taught me to tone it down a lot. But my mother was always
How to say it effectively.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, politely without offence and very roundabout ways. My mum, though, did fit very much the submissive model until I left home, and then she had a little bit of a personal awakening and became a very strong woman. So I've actually had a completely different modelling where the ideal woman, as per, worth rubies and as per all of Paul's injunctions, was very much modelled to me. So I wonder if that's something that passes down. I think that we have such a variety of female. Do we have female role models that can show us how to be female and how to be faithful, or otherwise? Do you think?
And I think that one takes time. I think when you're talking about generational change, I mean, the women's ordination thing is still being talked about, obviously. And I looked at the picture because Berlin, I don't know if you guys saw this, but the Berlin conference, immediately just said, "Oh, you've said not to ordain women. We're going to start straight away." And so the general conference representatives went there, and the meeting is so funny because it's the meeting about women's ordination, and they took a beautiful picture of the whole group of them talking about women's ordination. Because there are no women. There are no women in that picture. Because and people say, it's so cute. But to be in that position of leadership, you do actually experience having been a pastor. And if we haven't grown that through, where there are women who have been pastors long enough to take up leadership, we don't have the models. And the less we have the models, the fewer women there are taking it up.
So do you think that something like positive discrimination should be happening? As in positive discrimination to promote women more quickly through the hierarchy so that they do have more of a say?
I think that kind of action, it has to happen at some level to get it started. I think in 2000, I think there was a group formed here at Avondale because not enough women were taking up the theology positions to start doing theology, and it was actively trying to, I think, help fund and support women to start the training, because that's recognising that that's the first step. So I do think that kind of thing goes through.
Although the problem is if you do theology, you're not necessarily going to have employment, and you're facing an employment which will never be equal in pay for work. So it's interesting that there's such a strong promotion when there's also such a strong disincentive to pursue that course. Yeah.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
And I know, my Bible teacher when I was in the 90s in church school was one of the first women to graduate with a theology degree, but of course there was no job for her, so she turned to Bible teaching, something better for women.
So do you think, this whole thing is about women having a voice and women trying to give some direction to how we see things, but we've sort of just admitted or acknowledged that there are no women's voices in the appropriate places. So how do we go about encouraging women to find advocates for us? Because that's really what we're looking at, is women's voices won't be heard at the relevant levels because there's no women to speak. So what do? Do we approach men? Do we try and convince men? How do women actually get an effective and powerful voice in these contexts? Are there any ideas? Especially when we're trained to be quiet and not to be militant and to be sweet.
The role as a helpmeet. That particular phrase bugs me quite a lot.
Yes.
So many of the amazing women's voices that I see and hear are actually wives of male leaders, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I went to a fantastic church group last week, and it was such an amazing panel, and it was about this topic. It was about women's experiences in the church, and they had some kick-ass women on there, and it was for those who know the names, it's people like Joan Patrick and Julie Oliver and Gayleen Heights. Like, if you know anything, they're all there. They're such cool women, and you look at them, and they're there partly as in leadership positions through the reflected glory. And these are amazing women in their own right. You know, they're just incredible women who have been given more of a voice because of their spouses, in my opinion, anyway. And I'd like more women to be out there rocking it on their own account.
I was just thinking about that. How do we encourage those women to speak more? I know Julie Oliver and a few others, and they are such lovely women. But are they also people who have been taught not to challenge the male authority or to respect the rules of the church? So how can we encourage them to consider these gender issues as well? And how much do they consider them?
Well, I was actually looking at, because there's that idea too that someone's got to stay home and raise the kids. You know, someone's got to hold the family together. Someone's got to be doing that kind of work. And like I was looking at them all, and I know from watching a lot of those women how fantastic they are as mothers, how fantastic they are in their particular roles, and how much more they are speaking out if their children are out of home. And that time is being freed up. And I think that's where you always have to come back to that, is how much do we voluntarily give up to be mothers, to be spouses, to, you know, sit at home, be in our pajamas and feed ourselves a little bit and not, you know, just recover from all of that.
Which brings me to my other...
Yeah. I am so interested in, like, my hobbies are news and, you know, the internet and politics and all of those kinds of things. This is what I love to do. And I gave birth, and I gave up everything. I came back onto Facebook at Christmas because it's taken me this long to regain myself, because I gave it up because I couldn't. After postnatal depression, after long, you know, breastfeeding and all that sort of stuff, like, I just wasn't anything. There was nothing there to give. I couldn't listen to music and read a magazine, let alone be a meaningful voice for anything else. And I know I'm not alone in that. I think a lot of women lose themselves for a bit because, you know, it's too hard to do anything else.
Yeah, for sure. So this is another thing that I think, because I've got very young children. I've got a boy who's almost 2 and I'm pregnant with another boy. And I was thinking to myself this morning, how do I raise boys who are articulate about gender issues? How do we communicate? You're a teacher, Rochelle, and I'm not sure what your career is, Sarah, but we're all influencing the people around us, younger and older. How do we have the conversation so that we're raising boys as well as boys to, I don't know how to say it, we raise our girls to try and be everything they can be now because we're aware of their challenges. How do we raise boys to embrace that and enable that as well? And can you do it within a religious environment?
How do you teach it to them without telling them to shut themselves up? You know, how do you do it to them without teaching them to hold themselves back? Because that's not the answer, is to make them be less.
Yeah. And it's a lot of pressure for a boy, let's be honest. I mean, it's hard for women to be submissive, but it's a lot of pressure for a guy to step up. And also, when we're talking about equality, they will have to relinquish some of their privileges if they want to embrace women as equals. So there's another sort of backwards challenge in a way, where we have to challenge the gender ideas.
It's tough. Yeah. Fortunately, I've got 2 daughters, so I'm just find little voices.
Yeah, I was hoping for daughters.
Funny, I wanted 5 boys. 5, I was like, I'll do it. I'll have a team of them. It'll be all right. No, it didn't work out, guys. Don't worry. You know, that's hard. And it's hard. It's hard because I think everyone, the 3 of us here, and I'm sure so many women who will be listening, understand that there is a difference between the theory of it and the practicality of it. And you were saying how your dad wanted to tone it down. And we all know that that's how it works. Like, I wish that I could walk into a meeting and say what I thought, like I'm saying it to you guys now. Like, I wish that I could do that. But the reality is I'm going to get a lot more success for my goal if I walk in and say, hi. So, like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was just thinking about it. You know, if I do that, I'm going to be more successful. I am going to be able to achieve more. And so do I teach my daughters to win, or do I teach them to do it the right way?
Yeah.
My choice is win, and I don't know if that's right or wrong. I don't know that.
Yeah. I did a funny, when I was working as a lawyer, I did a random experiment where I wore only blue or pink tops to court for a week. And then I started wearing the same color top, I think it was green, and switching between skirts and pants just to see how I was treated differently each time I showed up by the men there. And it's the same thing that you're saying, the hi, oh, look, you know, I just didn't mean to interrupt, but I really needed to get this done. And we talk around in circles, whereas a bloke would just walk in and say, hi, I'm representing this person, sign here. And like, I wonder, you know, there are some days where you just play the game to be effective.
Sorry to bother you. Thank you so much for this thing that you should have done for me. And like I sound bitter, and I'm not. I'm not bitter, because nobody there has any ill will or intent, and I really get that. Like, never any person trying to. I don't meet sexist people very often, like blatantly sexist people. I just meet people doing their best in the system that they're in. And sure, it shuts me down in ways that are unnatural, but it's not it's not intentional necessarily.
I'm just going to pull you up on that, because that is so much something that a woman would say. It's like, I know they didn't mean it. I know they're not being horrible. I know that they're not being uncomfortable. They're just victims of the system. That is absolutely true. And I think it's a credit to women that we do give people the benefit of the doubt. But I also think we have to call bullshit on that and say, you know what? You didn't mean it badly, but I'm going to tell you right here and right now that when you behave that way, it diminishes me, or when you behave that way, it jeopardizes your best interest too. So, you know, get on board. I don't
do it. Do you say it to people? You guys say that to people?
I actually, in the last year, I actually have confronted two men who are very close to me. They were saying something extremely hurtful about gay people. And one of my dearest friends in the whole world is gay. And listening to these two people who are so close to me talk just broke my heart, because it was homophobic, it was fear-based, it was angry, and they couldn't hear it for themselves. And that's one of the first times I've actually said to someone I love, don't speak that way in front of me. I won't tolerate it, because it shows that you are afraid, and it shows that you are not a kind person at heart. And I'm getting emotional just remembering it. It just about killed me to say it. So this is something I have to do. I mean, there are people who have hurt me very badly through church, men and women, and I do the same thing. I say, well, they came from this upbringing, you know, they're victims of their culture, they couldn't do any better, and they did the best they could. That's all true, and that might help me understand them. It might help me forgive them, but it doesn't excuse the behaviour. If someone's behaved badly, that's it. You've behaved badly. And maybe that was understandable.
You know, I 100% agree with this, is that your feelings about what has happened to you are something you just need to be able to own. Because that hurt, it's unacceptable. It isn't okay.
And it guts you. And I think it's like looking at that poll that we did, and how many women have gone with other people's opinions instead of their own intuition, for example. I think this is the same sort of thing where our intuition will say we're being treated unfairly, but someone from outside will say, no, it's so just the way
and I've worked in the church for most of my life as well. So I'm the person. I went to an Adventist high school, I went to an Adventist tertiary institution, and then I went straight into church work and loved it. I've had some great times. No sadness about that for me at all. But what do I do there when that stuff keeps happening? Because it doesn't happen in the way where someone says, you're a woman, be silent. Like, that's not how it gets presented. It gets presented as, I'll walk into speak to, you know, my principal or my deputy principal, and they'll say, in a laughing tone, but they mean it. They'll say, I don't like you being taller than me. Do you mind sitting down?
Yeah. Maybe you could
So
say,
what
I don't like...
I've walked in to say, do you mind getting someone to cover my lesson? And so I feel like if I'm saying, excuse me, that's really like literally trying to reduce who I am.
Yeah.
How do I put that exactly?
Well, I think it depends on the person. And I think
the spiritual judgment comes in as a joke too. I even heard someone say something like it today. Like they say it like it's a joke, but it's not really a joke, and it's still just reinforcing the stereotypes and things of it.
I think a lot of people try to joke back, and I think that that's a really poor approach, because if you're joking back, if you say something like, well, at least I'm closer to God, or something like that, you're actually diminishing what it means to you, because you're making light of your own feelings. I think the first thing is, if it bothers you, to be honest about it and say, well, you know, this is who I am, and I'm not saying it properly. Sorry, I just need to... I wouldn't want to be in that situation. I used to get the one at work can't you grow a bit and get your own coffee cup down? Because they kept all the coffee cups up in the highest cupboard. And I'd be like, oh, because I'm only 5 foot. So, you know, I'd be climbing up the shelves. And I think that part of it is actually just being direct, at risk of being dismissed as a crazy lady. Just saying, you know what, I'm tall. I can't condescend.
And that's it. Like, I think the thing is, though, that we do get dismissed for being too much of certain things and not enough of other things. But it's because of the way we've been conditioned to be. Like, it is acceptable for little girls to cry when they get hurt. Like, if a little boy gets hurt, to, you know, run on, you know, you're okay, toughen up, bucko. It's that conversation. Whereas little girls do get more of the cuddle and that kind of thing. So if I'm an adult in the church and someone says something that hurts me and I've been told it's okay to cry, I am still crying, you know, I'm still going to cry. And then I get dismissed for crying, for being emotional. You're too emotional.
Toughen up.
You've got to get feelings out of it. Can we not just discuss the issues? Well, no, because my feelings are actually a really big part of what's just happened.
I was thinking about this today as well, before the talk, how we say, well, we get dismissed as women because we're emotional, or because women are more emotional, or women get irrational. And I was thinking about how we can say human beings are emotional, and that's still true. And I think there's just as many men who are sensitive and emotional as there are women. It's just they've been taught to deal with it differently. Like you say, we've been encouraged to express it. They've been encouraged to suppress it. And I think... I mean, it still annoys me that when I'm angry and when I'm confronting someone, I will cry and get the shakes, instead of, even if I'm dead set, passionate, prepared.
Oh, me too, but I'm ready with that one. I just go, I know I'm crying, but I am still listening and talking, so just ignore it.
I had to buy a car last week, and I had this happen to me because they had to tell me my old car wasn't roadworthy anymore. And pregnant, stinking hot day, no car, miles from home. And I started crying in the dealership. And I'm like, I am so shamed right now. I'm not upset. I'm okay with what you're telling me. My eyes are just doing this. But
no, I've said that exactly. My eyes are doing this, but my brain is still listening.
Yeah, just ignore this bit. I guess, how do we change that? Like you're saying with the joke, we're encouraged to be sensitive, and then we're told to toughen up. Why do we get such mixed messages? And why do people dismiss us when we call them out on it? You say, well, I can't be all sweetness and light and then also, you know, suddenly be everything. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought again. My cat just distracted me.
To do that. I know we might.
Yeah. I'm going to say hello. I'm going to say hello. You say hello. Hello. Sorry.
Yeah, I just on the side has just said it annoys her she gets told she's being dramatic. It's that thing, like, you're being too dramatic. No, I'm not. I'm being exactly as dramatic as I am, and maybe you should think of drama as an addition to the conversation.
Yeah. Do you think that it's actually a value judgment or an excuse? Oh, question.
Oh, we got a question.
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis pictured the universe as being overseen and created by something so masculine that we are all feminine in comparison. Ooh, which speaks to the church as bride idea, at least. Oh, this church's bride idea thing has been killing me, Simon. They leave me up as a reason to not support same-sex marriage.
Oh, really? I'm just thinking of, how does a church have a state of virginity, and does it have to wear white and be veiled?
How do you feel about this model? It's part of the perceived hierarchy of things that supports the patriarchy. How do you feel about an eternal universal patriarchy as proposed by Lewis as being a likely explanation of things? Fantastic.
How do I feel about that? I utterly disagree with a lot of what C.S. Lewis has said. I think that my personal feeling is that when we start to assign genders, we're assigning a social construction, and that's a human invention, not a divine invention. So how can we define male or female biologically, socially, whatever else, when it's a phenomenon beyond us? Let alone, how do we attribute gender to rocks and particles and atoms and all the stuff of the universe? I think that that's a little bit of a nonsense, personally. So I don't think there's a patriarchy. I don't even think of the human race as being gendered per se. We're not men and women, we're people. People first, and people of a particular gender second. So I think that's how I would respond to it, and hopefully that's not completely shutting it down too assertively.
Yeah, I do. I actually do think, Simon, gender goes beyond biological descriptors. I think, I guess I'm along Lorinda's lines here too, Simon, in that I do think that the conception of God as patriarchal is probably a retrospective addition to how we are supposed to see God or what God would be, because if we have an infinite God, it just does not suggest to me that God would be male. And I know there's certainly an argument from the Hebrew that there are feminine constructions in the way that God is represented even in the Old Testament, which if we want a patriarchal society, there is one. I think it's been adopted and used to legitimize a sense of God. No, I agree that male and masculine are not the same thing at all, and there's definitely a difference there. I guess where I come to that with masculinity is that to me, what is and isn't masculine is reasonably culturally assigned. I don't know. I keep bringing up Cordelia Fine, but that's because she's a new discovery of mine this year, and I think she's fascinating in that she looks at what's called neurosexism, which is Sarah, I have been trying to accept you. I'm just not quite sure how to do it. I accepted you a while ago, but it didn't work out. Yeah,
I'm trying
I'll keep
to.
on for a second while Lorinda tries to work that out. It's this idea that what we think of as masculine and feminine traits are far more widely shared than we like to admit, and that when you actually pop them down and look at whether an individual has them or not, a masculine trait, there's only about a 3% difference in whether it's held by a man or a woman, and a lot of that is to do with cultural conditioning. I have a lot of masculine qualities in the way I perceive the world. I have learned to present myself in ways that are more traditionally feminine to make that more acceptable, but it's not natural. And I'm not transgender, I'm not even close. Like, I do identify as female. I'd imagine that would be compounded massively if I was a transgender person, but I do think that gender is a spectrum rather than a set of binary oppositions, and I don't think that the patriarchal setup that C.S. Lewis gave there is particularly true of how gender works, based on what my reading is. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and it also makes
Yeah.
sense, man. If I'm a leader of anything, I really tend to support things that support my claim. That's very much characteristic of how I like to argue. Anything that supports my authority, I'll totally get in it. So if I was a church leader, I'd be like, oh yeah, you've got to be male and pretty much be me exactly to be in charge of stuff.
Yeah, I read ages ago when I was at church, I read this book called The Divine Romance. I can't remember the author now. And it was trying to sort of suggest the male and female elements of the Trinity. And the whole time I was reading it, I just felt like it was a complete and utter stretch. I think I tend to adhere more to the idea that man and woman functioning effectively together as equals is actually what makes something divine in a way, rather than this arbitrary, God is the Father, Jesus is the Son, and the Holy Spirit is the woman, or any idea like that. It just seems very contrived to try and make that paradigm fit. Yeah.
Well,
I think as well,
it's with everything with the nature of God. I don't know. Like, I think there's that sense. I just don't know. I can't answer it. I think we try and understand God in our own terms. And yeah, we have different biology. And so we try and work out, when God made man in his own image, what does that look like? Is it a male image or a female image? Like, to what extent is that a physical image anyway? We just don't know. Like, it's not that set out. I mean, I know we'd love it to be, but that's the nature of being a human, trying to understand any kind of God. Surely it's going to be a bit bigger than you can fit on into your brain. Otherwise, what's the point of that?
Yeah. I think it's really difficult as well to differentiate where religion has imposed gender roles and where the cultural and societal thing. So obviously the Bible came out of a patriarchal society, which is written by a lot of, pretty much all men, and there's very, very little female representation in that. And when we look at our society as well, it's only 100 years ago that women got to vote. Even 100 years ago, women were property. And I think in England, women still can't inherit some property. So in the space of 100 years, we've gone from being transferable property that's got a particular value to being individuals, which is huge. So how much of this gender is coming from, how much of the religious idea of gender comes from those privileges, or male privilege, which has existed since the dawn of time, it seems.
You're alluding to the theory of what I really want to believe. And I did actually ask this Cordelia when I went and got a chance to speak to her, if this is like, because I want to believe this, because I think this is probably true, is that it's a sign, it's culturally ingrained, etc., etc. If that is true, why is it so bloody universal? Because it's so easy to point a finger at Western culture and look at the embeddedness of Judeo-Christian thinking and how Western culture has developed. But seriously, all over the world, it's like the only cultures where women get to be in charge are mythical. Like, seriously, I would love to be an Amazon if I could be Wonder Woman. But where are these cultures where this dynamic doesn't exist? Actually, because I think every woman who's listening has seen ways in which women are trained to take that subservient position in my culture. But I do it myself without my daughters. I do.
Yeah, I suppose some people would say that's an evolutionary trend because strength was required to survive, and also because women have been biologically designed as the nurturer. I don't actually agree with that. Certainly we've been biologically designed to be the baby carrier. I don't know if we're biologically designed as the nurturer, though.
Oh, that's so funny. So, question do you want to design?
I'm trying to be...
How else is she going to explain?
I have no opinion on the evolutionary or created aspects of the biology of the female. I just don't want to go there. Let's just assume the uterus. I don't care why or how. So I think that that's part of why that's a universal trend across societies, perhaps.
I just want to say I'm loving having Simon asking questions in the sidebar. If anybody else wants to get involved in that, that would be super cool. Sarah seems to have popped over to the sidebar saying some cool stuff over there. I liked it.
Yeah.
I've always said just fine. Nice, I like myself, Simon.
Although now that we've talked about other cultures, I'm sidetracked by the fact that my husband is Chinese and my in-laws are absolutely delighted that we're having another boy. So they were really happy that our first child was a girl, but the response to the second child, which is a boy, was over the top as far as gratitude that there was a male child. And I think that it's fair to say that gender issues are universal, and why that is, I mean, that's a historical question. I think that we need to look at the future and what women are capable of now and how our society functions now and whether the gender division is appropriate anymore, because for the most part, I don't think it is.
Yeah, I actually think you're right. Is it appropriate anymore? And I think surely society and the church have reached the point where we can say this is not appropriate anymore. And I'm waiting for that sound made far more prominently everywhere in my life. This sexism is not appropriate anymore.
Yeah. And I think that it's quite healthy to say that's not appropriate. And just say it like it is. And if someone takes offense to that, be prepared to explain why we find it inappropriate. But I think it's okay to draw that line in just that way.
I have to say, Facebook has been a real revelation. As I said, I have only been on Facebook again since Christmas. And I have not met people like this in my day-to-day life. I'm a very cheerful person, and I tend to meet lots of other cheerful, lovely people who want to talk to me. And on the internet, I meet very much a bigger range of people, and it's been a real shock to me how many people are very happy to be ridiculously sexist to my avatar, I guess, and then tell me that that's not sexism. I don't, and it does. It's because I'm in a lot of religious talk groups at the moment, and it does tend to be religious men just saying stuff that I'm like, that is sexist. Though.
Yeah. What's your number one offensive, sexist, religious idea?
Oh, it is sexism, that headship thing. Bugs me. And then it is that, I guess, because complementarianism is based on an essentialism that I don't believe in, that one also really bugs me.
Yeah. I think my number one bugbear, although it's more than a bugbear, that diminishes it, is the idea of purity and ownership of women's sexuality. That one, it's one thing for someone to say true love waits and to make a conscious choice as a teenager to choose those sorts of approaches. But, you know, the conservative ideas about even a father giving you away, you know, being given away, let alone purity balls in America, that sort of thing. I remember growing up being taught lots of biology about where babies come from, but any idea of how sex works, you had to wait till your wedding night to get that. And, you know, and certainly not from a woman. Just those concepts about being clean, about being pure, about being presentable. It seemed that the body is the temple of God applied to women a lot more than it applied to men. And I think that's quite problematic as far as helping women or learning as a woman to be freer and to actually respect every part of your identity. I'm not an expert on sexuality by any means, but I know that since leaving church, it's been quite a revelation. Sorry?
I'm a personal expert on my own.
Yeah, God forbid that we actually have a gender and we actually have sexuality and all that.
Oh, man. This bugs me so much. This idea that women don't own their bodies is evil. Like, it's actually evil on every level. And I think the church just shoves it into our just ears from a tiny, tiny little age that you owe your body to someone else. Your body is a temple as opposed to your actual body. And what that actually does, sorry, I really have a passion on this one because I taught, as I said, to kids too many years. Just
so I hate the idea that my body needs a guardian. I find that absolutely wrong.
And you don't parent it until they pass you off to your husband. That women's bodies should not be something that they are the expert in is ridiculous. It fills me with rage that you don't own it, that you don't get to choose whether you have a child in it or not. I mean, they're quiverful movement, don't start me on that, but then it takes out into abortion rights as well, because it's that idea of no women should, it's not about murder exclusively, it's also about the idea that women don't have the right to choose whether they want to continue a pregnancy or not, because they don't have that kind of ownership in their own body. They're almost supposed to have
that they don't have the right, but we don't have the intelligence.
Like, really?
It
grosses me out.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea that not only do we not have the right, we don't have the capacity or the capability, like we're permanent children who can't grasp, the complexities of being a child. I mean, of being a woman, an adult who's competent to make their own choices. It's very...
in that system, you're never a woman. You are this sexless guardian child forever.
Yeah. It's like you don't even inhabit your own body to a certain degree.
No, you don't. And I do also think I really have problems when we understand that the spiritual teaching of abstinence is documented and proven to have such terrible outcomes in terms of teen pregnancy, STDs, sexual hang-ups and psychological issues caused by it, not to mention all the judgment and trauma if you happen to veer past this line, which most people wouldn't know where it was. It's I would go so far as to say it's abusive to young Christian girls. It's the damage that is done is unacceptable.
Yeah. I think that a lot of what we're talking about as far as the gender issues, there's the silencing, the shaming, in a sense the dehumanizing as far as not being considered competent or not owning your own sexuality. I think all of those behaviours are actually abusive. And I think that a lot of women, whether they're very religious or ex-religious, actually suffer the psychological consequences of that. It's actually, I think it's like an abusive relationship in some ways, because, for example, you're being constantly told that you're wrong, that you were made wrong. As a child, I would have a strong opinion about something, or I would speak out, and people didn't necessarily disagree with what I said, but it was wrong that I said it. So a message that I got through most of my church life was that I was made wrong. And you think about how that impacts on people over time. You've been made a sexual creature with sexual desires, you're made wrong. It's, I think there's a lot of accountability that needs to be considered, and also a lot of healing that needs to happen for women.
And when you also take into account for women's sexuality specifically, how much it takes confidence, trust, space, time, all of those issues to be successful for a lot of women, and then to have that balance. And I think it's true what you said, it is part of a broader abusing of creativeness. I hear all, I do, some person who seems lovely put up on their wall that, one of those verses about women with your husband is one of those verses. And I was like, ew. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to write ew, I hate this. And then me how many, because I'm quite confrontational with people, and it's interesting to me the private messages that I then get and who they're from. And so many of them are from young women saying, I look forward with longing to the time when I find my husband to be the head of me.
Oh, God. I have to say, you've just reminded me of one of the grossest and most humiliating experiences I had as a teenager. I was in year 7, so I was 13 going on 14 in Bible class. And the Bible teacher was talking about heaven. And I asked a question about marriage. Would we be married in heaven? Because I genuinely wanted to know, if you had a partnership, if you had a lifelong relationship, explain this to me. And it was in context. And the teacher's response to me was to say, Lorinda, what you really want to know is whether you'll get to have sex in heaven.
In year 7?
7 in front of the entire class in Bible class.
You've got 13.
Yeah, at an SDA school. And I was like, no, I'm asking if I will have a partnership. I mean, I didn't use the word partnership because I didn't know it then. And he said, no, you want to know if there's sex? I was so humiliated because, you know, the rest of the day, all the boys in the class were like, hey, you know, you want to have sex with me and that kind of thing. And
whoa, yeah, it'll be awesome in heaven, buddy. I suppose it's going to be good.
I just thought that was an absolute shocking way, firstly, for a young male teacher who would have only been in his mid-20s to portray marriage as being about sex, let alone to portray heaven and relationships.
Well, like that's you know what my dad actually used to say to me, like his generation, my mum got given at 20 a little book called When Your Night Comes Riding, about how to keep your riding costume clean for when the night comes riding.
Will he use his spurs on you, Michelle?
No, but it suggests that instead of doing dirty activities like going to the movies, you should wholesomely go camping together for the weekend. I was like, oh boy.
Okay, let's go somewhere really cold so we have to share our body warmth.
They actually got told here, the test of how much you love Jesus, about whether you want Jesus to come before you lose your virginity or not. And if you are still curious about losing your virginity, you just don't love Jesus enough.
Oh my God. Yeah, someone's written in wondering if the teacher who said that to me would say the same thing to a male student about just wanting to have sex. I think that's an interesting question, and I think if he did, everyone would have thought it was brilliant. So
that's the difference. It wouldn't have been said in the same shaming way. It would have been like, yeah, of course all men are interested in sex. Of course all boys want to have sex. And I hear that often is said by spiritual leaders. I went to a church service a month ago, and the same thing was said in the church service. From the pulpit, the minister said, oh, we all know that girls hit their sexual prime from 16, and I don't know when it ends, but it's not far past that. And am I right, boys? Am I right, fellas? We all know when a woman is at her best in her prime. And I'm like, ew. Fella, no.
So I actually thought that women hit their sexual peak around, 35, 40, because we were finally comfortable with ourselves and done, with a lot of the pressures, and we actually get to relax.
Well, I think it's that thing about, would it be said to a male student? Look, maybe, but certainly not with the same judgment. Certainly not with the same.
And I think it was an experience. It was absolutely shaming. And, almost, even though the teacher said it with a laugh and a smirk, it was designed to make me feel just that little bit dirty. And you got to wonder, I think. You were talking a moment ago about... Sorry?
Hurts my heart for little baby Larissa, who had to walk around the rest of the day thinking, am I a bad person?
Yeah, well, got over that. I think it's interesting you were talking about the hierarchy of joy and, Jesus, others, yourself, and you also talked about the umbrellas with Jesus, husband, wife, and that sort of thing. Do you think it's kind of offensive in a way to have that flow chart where a woman is supposed to keep going back up to Jesus instead of necessarily prioritizing her children or her husband?
I've heard you ask this before, and I'm wondering at what point there is a conflict. I guess I didn't write, you asked about this, and because I'm currently a single parent, I didn't feel like I should, obviously, fail a marriage, man. I'm not the one to speak.
No,
but
I wouldn't put it that way at all.
No, but you know what I'm saying. I was like, what I would say is, why is this thing about Jesus versus others? Why is this even a hierarchy that needs to be given? I mean, surely when we've got a Jesus who is love someone's put that picture up. Someone who is love to an infinite degree, how would we be considering that there's some kind of conflict in there? Because if we sense that Jesus is asking you to commit your time to the church, say, as a in a role like music leader or children's Sabbath school or potluck organizer or one of those many roles that you're doing, and that is coming into conflict with your family, it's pretty clear to me that that's not a godly calling for you to keep doing that thing that is destructive to your family.
I agree with you, because I tend to believe that, okay, I don't think of it in terms of Jesus anymore, but I would tend to say that in my ethics, my first duty is to my husband and my children. So where there is a conflict, I would always prioritize them, because that's where my current calling or attention and commitment is.
Yeah, I don't believe that any ethical system requires us to sacrifice ourselves and our family. I just don't think that's a choice under any ethical system that should be valued.
Do you think, though, that it's interesting you use the word sacrificing yourself? I think this week has shown me, through the poll that we did and through some of the conversations, that it's common practice for women to sacrifice themselves, particularly through church, particularly, kicking and screaming in some ways, perhaps. I'm just wondering about why we do that.
Silent about the sacrifice and not to demand recognition for it. I don't know if you saw that special video clip that looked at servanthood and the fact that women, and it was specific to women in servanthood should not receive recognition for what they have done, that they should joyfully work themselves to the bone under the radar.
Okay, well, I'm going to throw this one out at you. A basic principle, Jesus says the worker is worth his hire, he's worth his payment, as in, fair work for fair pay is a relatively enshrined principle in Jesus' words, and also the right of the master to decide on the payment. So how do you tie that in with gender, where particularly in religious circles and church circles, the woman goes very much unsung, and where we do have, I haven't actually looked at whether or not there's pay disparity within the Adventist church. I know that there's a pay issue with the ordination, because women can't be ordained, so they can't get the pay rise. So how do we rationalise what I would say is the ethics of Jesus with the way gender is actually treated?
I don't think there's an answer except to say that it's wrong. Simon's made such a good point that if the pastor that the rest of his service is supposed to just do it. And I worked in the Adventist system as a teacher, and we got given, I remember it was when work choices was coming in, which is that system of should people have to negotiate their own wages as individuals. And at that point, a lot of Adventist teachers started to unionise. That is, they started to join secular teachers' unions, independent schools unions, and look for where the conditions of the Adventist church were not meeting the required legal minimums. And they weren't. And so once enough people unionised, obviously that had to change. And we got given little bookmarks that said to us that we should ask not what we should get for our service, but rather how much more we could give. And this was the yeah. And here's what makes that worse. It was on the back of the teachers' cards that they gave out that year, the identification cards that they gave out to say who we were. And it specifically told us not to ask for recognition, financial, all of that for what we were doing.
Wow. And did they attribute it to JFK? Because he said that. Ask not what you can do for what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country.
Said the same thing. Cracks me up. I gripped my card straight up. I said, you know what? No, I give enough. And I gripped it in the meeting too. I said, no, this is not a sane, ethical, loving way to treat the people who are here. We are the face of Jesus to these kids. So that's the pressure. That's the pressure right there. Not there's what more can I do? What more can I do? That's the way to burn us out and kill us. And I was particularly interested that was coming and being said to teachers, because it's a really female-dominated profession.
Yeah, I find
not
really...
the leader. Sorry, I have some issues about that. because, I'll just put it out there, have been a female English teacher for some time, and the number of male English teachers who come in and all get the same talk. They graduate, they come in their first year and get told, your leadership material, you're exactly what we're looking for. We need more leadership from male teachers. No. You need less gendered leadership from male teachers. You need leadership from people who are good at educational leadership, man. This is a joke. Don't think that they're good leaders because they're a man. And I'm not talking about one conversation. I'm saying I taught for 16 years. I saw a number of these people come and go, and they all got the talk.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, I didn't get the talk. I'm shocked.
It's so unfortunate. I've been seeing a lot of articles talking about how great some dads are, that they're looking after the kids for a day a week so the wife can do stuff. And this article is saying, stop complimenting dads for babysitting. You know, they're actually parenting. Yeah. But how do we change that? Because I know that there is a bit of a cry out for more male teachers, particularly in primary schools, for more male role models. Do you think that that's where people are getting a little bit confused, where they're assuming that a role model has to be in a leadership position, whereas I think just being present would make you a role model as a teacher?
Well, and I think this is such a good point. Some people have leadership gifts and some people have teaching gifts, and they're not necessarily the same thing. And good teachers are often not the best administrators. Being male or female doesn't particularly make you either. And for that presumption to be there, we are looking for men to do this. It is gross.
Yeah.
And it is also so many, and that's the promise that's held out to lure them, the young men in primary teachers. Well, really, if you want an admin job, you can do it and get much better paid than in teaching. If you want to get into education, you need to love teaching. You need to love education. Yeah.
This sort of brings me back to the poll as well, where one of the first questions on there was, because of your gender, have you chosen a different role, career, or contribution? I think this is interesting to me because I was told quite emphatically by someone that I would make a terrible teacher because I would get too cranky with the kids who didn't want to learn, which is probably true, but, you know, there's frustrations with every job. So I was very much presented the options that teaching or nursing were basically the appropriate choices presented to me in high school. I also had interests and abilities to do journalism or law, and I was also interested in theology, funnily enough. But pretty much all of them got shut down, and I did nursing by default. So I'm just wondering how that experience has affected other women and how that also affects the way we engage in the professions and how we end up with so much more gender disparity because of these soft, caring professions which are acceptable. Sorry.
It's a hard one. I knew I wanted to be a teacher from when I was 12. Like, I knew I was really clear on it, and I've never deviated from it. That's what I've always wanted to do. Interestingly, everyone in my family is a teacher. Every female's a teacher or a nurse or a hairdresser. Like, that's pretty much the range. But I certainly know of many women who wanted to do jobs that they didn't feel suited to. I mean, I got into law and I did consider it, but teaching was always for me. Do you think that I don't know if there are. Is it just the caring professions? Like, do you think this is a problem for those of us who do choose to go into those kinds of jobs? Like, do you think we are perpetuating something there? Because I'm not a particularly soft teacher. I'm fine teaching.
I think there's a few different factors there. I mean, teaching and nursing also have probably the highest level of workplace flexibility for women, partly because, you know, it's shift work, it's school holiday work. So I certainly got a lot of messages that, you know, your biological clock's going to start ticking and you want to think about how to balance career and children. And I think that that's part of it, perhaps. But I think there's also perhaps some active discouragement from some of the less feminine professions. For
I think
example.
this week on STEM jobs being 13% less well paid for women.
Yeah.
Something like that. I saw an article this morning.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Sarah's good point. Men never get told they need to balance career and children, and it's that you go. I did think about flexibility, and I did think about trying to make that balance. One of my office mate had a baby when I first started teaching, and she was the breadwinner in her family. Her husband worked casually only, and so they made the decision that she would come back to work after 6 months and that he would continue on. And she was genuinely told by our principal that would not work out as a system, and so he would not keep her position as a permanent position because he knew that she would not be able to leave the baby.
That's terrible.
And that it would just cause too much resentment in the relationship if the father did.
Yeah, I think that's really, really unfortunate. I mean, I got a lot of encouragement that I didn't want to waste time, that it was important to get on and get my career under my belt so that I would have the luxury of taking time out to have kids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so no gap year for me. But also just that constant being taught as well, being sweet, being ladylike, being pleasant, not being shrill or confrontational or argumentative. Clearly being a lawyer is not going to work with that. And clearly if I had chosen the theology path, I would have had a lot of fights on my hands at that point because I would have been going into Theo 1999, when there were very few. I think there's maybe 5 or 6 women who had done that so far. So all of my options would have been confrontational with my family, with my peer group, and with the belief system that I'd been told I should have. So for me, a really big thing is that I've genuinely struggled with a lot of my talents and believed that I have been wrong to have them and that they're not given to me as gifts to be used, but as challenges to overcome and suppress.
Suppress is the key word to me. I've never felt that I shouldn't use my talents necessarily. I have been told that I should cap them, and it's that thing: cap, press them, find a balance. Don't go too far. Don't be extreme. I react really that kind of suggestion. Now I am disproportionately angry at those kinds of suggestions because I want to be the best that I can be. I want to be the biggest. I want to be the most. I don't want to be shrunk.
Yeah, I think I feel now. Yeah, I think I feel now that I don't want any more regrets. I never used to feel that I had regrets, but when I look back and I wonder what would my life look like if I had done teaching instead of nursing? What would it look like if I had done theology and chosen other paths? And I'm absolutely delighted with the life I have now. It's better than what I would have imagined. But you do sort of think, what if some of those gifts and some of those passions had been fostered earlier in life? What if my gender hadn't been a dictating factor? Who would I have turned out to be? And I don't mind. I don't mind having. Sorry, I'm just curious, really, and I think it's sad that people who loved me and knew me contributed, in a sense, to shutting down a lot of those options and opportunities. I think that's something I wouldn't want to happen to any other woman if I could.
Mine is interesting because I was so supported by my family. I was really told that I was okay. And what I miss is the chance to not be speaking in opposition to what I see as restriction. Because someone here has said, if we were all encouraged to live life to our potential regardless of gender, and I live a lot in defiance of gender, and I am often really conscious of what I am attacking with my presence and my voice, and I think I probably often go too far. I don't know, because, and when we're talking about who was willing to come and speak on camera here, I think everyone said, oh, no, not me, I don't know, that sort of thing. And I made the comment then that I, on purpose, when I am dialoguing, speak more often than I would necessarily. I speak more than I have things to say because I'm really determined that my voice be in there. And that thing that we need to have statistics and we need to have knowledge and we need to know our shit before we say it, because otherwise we're going to be convicted for not knowing our stuff. I will not. Like, I, on principle, really rarely refer to an expert or to a teaching or a theory or a system or statistic, because I really, really, really want to just have my presence be enough, just have my specific self be enough. And so that's how I communicate. If you're in a Facebook group with me, you'll know I'm flooding it. Like, I'm flooding it with my opinion based on nothing, because so often and so many of the women I know don't feel okay to do that. And I wish that I wasn't speaking out of that. I wish that I was just speaking, not reacting, just speaking.
I'm curious that you said, Checker. Sorry, Bethany's crying. My 3-year-old's making some noises upstairs. I'm like, you said that you live in defiance of your gender.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you find that completely exhausting. I feel like I spent the first probably 26, 27 years of my life living in defiance of my own identity. And it's only in the last, 10 years that I've started to recover from the fatigue of that. So how does that go for you, living in defiance of gender? Is that something that energizes you and invigorates you, or is it something that just burns you out slowly?
I think it gets really wearying a degree that it's hard to voice, because teaching has made me so conscious of being able to speak for others and to be, like, when I'm in a classroom with 20 to 30 students, I am a voice that's telling them how life should be. And so that's exhausting and made me conscious that I needed to be speaking to all those really smart girls in that room who acted dumber, that I needed to be there, not visibly like promoting the aspects of womanhood at them, so that there was a model there. And it does get exhausting, it really does. And the mistakes you make form pretty badly too, because you've got that wrong. And because you're not relying on your natural instincts, but fighting against them, there is always self-doubt, because I do go too far. And I do, and I do often get comments like, can you let other people speak? Can you let other people say things? And they're not entirely wrong. Like, I am talking too much for my own instinct as well. And then I'm like, to what degree am I getting it wrong? What degree am I balancing it? I don't know.
At the same time, I guess it's difficult because there's a responsibility to speak as well. And if everyone, I'm sad that so many people don't feel like they should speak. And one thing that I believe very strongly is that the most important thing for a healthy recovery after a distressing event or after a long period of dehumanization is validation and advocacy. And it's one thing to validate someone, it's another thing to advocate for them without talking over the top of them. So something that I wonder often when I hear people say that, I'm not confident to speak because I'm not an expert or I haven't done the research or whatever, I find it hard sometimes not to want to jump in and push the point for them and advocate so that they can be heard. And yet that's often received as being bullish or taking over from them or any number of things that aren't helpful. And I think as well, a lot of us are quite prone to burnout. A lot of the women who notice these things and care about these things are prone to burnout. So I'm wondering how we continue to give that voice, whether it's as an advocate for someone else, and also how we protect ourselves as women so that we can speak up without taking on too much emotional cost.
Yeah, and I also think the danger in there is that I tend, like for myself, I am not dismissing the right of any one woman to enter into a relationship with that Jesus love lover. Like if that is what one woman truly desires for. But I don't like it. And so my tendency is to just speak against it, you know, and that's also a problem. What I actually believe in is the right of women to self-individuate, to choose that for themselves. Sometimes I do feel concerned that I've gone too far in silence in that perspective. But then when you're fighting against something that's pretty ingrained, you know, how far is too extreme? What's going too far? What is it? Because if it's the cost to me, sure, I can stop when I'm burning out. If that's my problem. I can step back. But if it's a bigger thing about does my voice help or hinder what's the choices for?
Yeah, which leads to the question of as women, I think we're so separate. And someone earlier in the week raised the comment about how catty women can become, and just how productive we are, how good we are at excluding one another, or putting the different girl on the fringes. I'm just wondering how on earth we encourage a collective where a lot of women are quite happy with the status quo in church, for example. They're not particularly...
I'm more conservative if they call it out. Like I just hate it so hard that it's hard for me to remember that I can still love them and I can still engage with them, and that, you know, I just need to keep making clear that that's not a choice for me, that they can choose that.
Yeah,
that's just
for
not
sure.
my choice.
I'm wondering though how we can encourage women to embrace that diversity of opinion, because I wonder if you've had this experience where as a woman you've stood up and you've said, I'm not okay with this, and before the men can get to you, you've had a girlfriend tear you down. How do we encourage women to support each other's wishes and each other's perspectives and ideas about gender instead of attacking one another? I guess an example is I actually loved that movie Mona Lisa Smiles, where Julia Roberts is the university teacher, and she's really trying to encourage one of the girls to go to uni. And she's like, I don't want to. I want to be a mum. That's my choice. Don't put your choice on me. Let me have my voice, and let's do it without actually fighting one another. Is there a way that we can encourage the conversation and promote diversity and kindness?
I think it does come back to that thing of modelling your own choices and being out loud about your own choices so that your morals are being presented within the church. Because, I mean, you talked about your own family experience, and I think that's more typical than mine was for what most girls be. And I think this is partly, I mean, don't get me wrong, I thought about moving to the Synod Church, I have, because there are a lot of issues there. Gender is one of them that really bothers me. And ultimately, I feel like it comes back to Bronwyn Reed. I don't know if you watch it, but she did the most amazing thing, which is, if I don't like it, I'm not leaving. And I've been wrestling with it because it's, you know, it's that idea of, do we walk out? Do we stage a walk out of the church until we get gender equality? And my answer is, no, you stay in conversation. But then that other argument is, you know, you leave. I don't love that either. I am so much a fan of plurality. I'm so much a fan of open space that I think that is the best model that I can probably provide, is to continue being individualistic, to continue forging through that while not leaving and while not asking anyone else to leave. Just saying, look, let's have this talk, let's keep talking. Just the more you hear it.
It suddenly makes me, what you were saying suddenly just made me think about Rosa Parks and the civil rights movement in America. I really love that a lot of that was sparked off just because one woman sat down on the bus and didn't move. And you sort of wonder how powerful that statement can be. And just the fact of not taking it and choosing not to move or choosing to simple can actually begin a very powerful kind of change.
Yeah.
And it can be done with grace. Gosh, there's a word that gets misused a lot, isn't there? The idea of being gracious and yet also being assertive and courageous. Yeah.
I've got to keep.
Oh, hello. So cute. So I think Pete was saying what we should look at. We've talked about a lot of the things that were on the agenda sort of tangentially. I don't know if there's anything on there that you really wanted to talk about, but one thing that I thought we haven't really made reference to is craving acknowledgement and attention, which I would sort of call validation as well. And is that part of your experience at church? I know it's really funny, like when you get a new minister at church and everyone brown nose is like crazy trying to get in with the popularity contest and the pats on the head and whatnot. And I certainly was quite desperate for affirmation as a younger woman. Is that something that you've experienced, and do you think it's counterproductive?
Experiences where someone said, yeah, like what you're doing here as a woman is actually heaps important.
I think even less than that. Just I think that women do give a lot, and often we're not noticed or acknowledged. Like what you were saying, where when a woman serves, she shouldn't be noticed, or she should just be grateful for the privilege of having served. I'm just wondering how that drives the need within a lot of us to actually have someone pat us on the back or have someone give us some encouragement. And is that something that's driving women away, do you think, when we are giving everything we've got and we're not getting... let me put it a better way. There was an unspoken rule for me, I felt, within church, that if I ticked all the boxes, if I obeyed all the rules, I would be loved and I would belong and I would be accepted. If I didn't, well, you're screwed. So I spent an awful lot of time getting all those boxes ticked and getting the extra brownie points, but I still didn't necessarily feel or get the love and the belonging. So what I'm trying to say is, how do we address that need within women? How do we encourage people to acknowledge what women are doing and acknowledge just how hard they're working just for that acceptance, just for that sense of belonging?
I wish I knew that. I do wish I knew that, because I know that a lot of women address it by forming women's groups and by making it a separate thing. And it is part of the answer, and I love what we're trying to do here. I love this. And other women's stories, other women's voices, and I desperately hope that next time it'll be more than just us. But I hope that we've managed to start it, and that people will be able to know that, because it's hearing other women that I love, but it's not enough.
No,
not enough. And so much of the validation is condescending and separate. Women's affirmation, condescending affirmation, don't fill that void that is made.
Yeah. Pete's just done a 10-minute call, and I think maybe...
I still, what does it take to validate? Because I know women's ordination, what does it take to validate? Because I know that women's ordination is the obvious systemic one, but I think that ordination is just such a...
It's a token.
Yeah, it's a token when it comes down to, does your voice count in your church?
To be honest, I don't think women's ordination will meet the need at all. It's saying a woman can be a CEO. Yay! I think that validation is a little bit more than that.
The Yahoo woman, like that whole scenario should just be written down.
Yeah, I think that validation, that acknowledgement, comes from actually being really seen and really heard by an individual. it's not something that you can do as an organisation or systemically. But it's something that individuals can learn. The ability to look someone in the eye and say, I'm sorry that happened to you, or, hey, I really appreciated what you did, without being patronising or without being tokenistic. Actually being real and being prepared to see what's real.
What do you think?
Sorry?
That's a big one to me. Like, because you are an expert at this living thing, what do you think?
One of the best things that my husband ever said to me when I was trying to explain something I was quite distressed about, I was fumbling my words and I just said, do you get what I'm trying to say? Do you understand what I mean? And he said, no, I've got absolutely no idea what you're on about, but I wish I could understand, so please keep talking. And I think that's probably when I fell in love with him.
My first date with my current partner, looked at me over a bowl of noodles and said, do you think feminism is still necessary? I choked noodles. I was like, yes, I do. And he was like, but why? And that one question, but why, was really important to me, that willingness to hear it. Willingness to listen.
Yeah, it's like my husband and one of his friends trying to tell me that you shouldn't be a feminist, you should be a humanist. While I was saying, no, a humanist is completely different. Sarah's just tweeted that beautiful equality of the sexes, as well as acceptance of people, accepting LGBTQ people. So I think that that's really true, like the ability to accept people in their true identity as they state it, not as the church states it. I think that's a really big thing, is accepting that identity.
In their true identity.
And for anyone who doesn't know, feminism is the radical belief that all human beings are equal. So that's what we're talking about, is the radical belief all human beings are equal in and out of church, throughout the world, whatever their gender, whatever anything.
And it's such a radical thing to say. It is such a radical thing that people do not need to be given any kind of voice, that they have one, that we need to be listening.
Yeah.
Sarah, I really hope that we'll get to speak more about this LGBTQ thing. And you briefly mentioned the disfellowshipping before, and I'm horrified, and I would, if you're willing, would love to hear more about that at some point. I hope we can talk about that. That's not acceptable. That's not acceptable.
Yeah, so I think we have to go now, but thank you for the chat, everyone. It's been a learning experience for me. Feedback is welcome, especially, if people want more chats in the future. We'd love to have other people talking, and we'd love to have other questions and ideas being thrown around. So, let us know, and thanks.
Yeah, that was cool. How do we hang up now?
I don't know. I was going to say I don't know what to do now.
Thank you to those of you. Thank you. Also, thank you to people who commented, and I love that. And if you're going to talk, call in. We'll work out the tech issues. We'll just get better and better at this. And comments, all of that stuff will be fantastic.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Oh, someone's calling in. Wait. So callers.
Well, can you answer it, Michelle?
We've got a caller. Let's hope the tech works itself out.
Wow.
Okay. I just need 1 second.
No, you go. Hello.
Hi.
I'm Rochelle.
Hi, Rochelle. What's up?
We're just talking about women and the church.
Women and the church. Like women being like ministers, or...
I guess that's definitely could be part of it.
I'm not really sure. I was like, wait, women? I'm like, oh, I'm a woman. Let's check out this room.
Yeah, we're talking about women's experiences with religion. Have you got much experience with religion?
Yeah, I'm actually really religious. I'm a Catholic.
You are a Catholic. Fantastic.
And as time progressed,
you don't hold hands. So I'm interested in this.
Yeah, it's totally weird. It's totally like modest and whatever. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't hold hands? You can't do these things. This is ridiculous. But the thing that upset me with this the most is like girls that did this would find like loopholes and would do other things. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
I know exactly what you mean.
It's like I'm still a virgin, but I'm still gonna give him like. There he goes. He knows exactly what I'm talking about in the chat. Exactly.
Yeah. So I have one of this too, and I think it is strange. Also, there's another lady here that I haven't said anything to. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. What brings you to the group?
I don't know, women's voices. I'm a woman. I'm pretty sure I am. Biologically, I've been told so.
Do you have a religion?
I was raised in Levian Satanism.
Were you actually raised in Satanism?
Yes.
Do they have strong ideas about gender roles?
My parents are both male.
Okay. So what kind of messages did you get from your belief system about your gender?
It's women and children are held in the highest regard. So
cool.
I didn't get any negative, I guess, from it. I was just told that women are pretty cool, I guess.
Well, women are pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
Sharon?
Oh yeah.
So, in Levian Satanism, is it an organized system that you were participating in, or was it just a philosophy that you were raised in?
No, it's an organized system. We have a church that we go.
So you still attend?
I don't personally still go. You have to pay. But yeah, there's a church that you can go to.
See, this is so, how do you even be a rebellious Levian Satanist? What do you do?
What was that?
If you're wanting to go through a rebellious stage, what do you do?
You become a Catholic.
Look at that.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. So, in your church, you attended for a while?
I attended until I was about, I want to say like 15, 16.
Cool. Were there women leaders in that?
I'm sorry, like what did you say?
Was there female leadership in your church?
Yes, there was. It works differently than most churches do. We do have female, I guess they'd be called priests, but they do different rituals. You can learn how to bells and this kind of stuff. They don't believe in a god. They don't believe in God. They don't believe in Satan per se. It's just the idea of Satan that they are interested in, and the idea of rebelling against normal religion, I guess, would be.
Yeah, and this is why I think it's so interesting. Because I think that's probably part of it. It's just the rebellion by saying women are cool.
Yeah.
Are you able to tell us why you? Sorry, are you able to tell us why you chose to leave the church?
I haven't left. I still believe in it a lot. I don't practice as much as I used to when I was younger. It's been a couple of years.
So we've been talking a lot about sexism in religion and in society, and the way religion paints women. In the Catholic Church, there's a lot of emphasis on the virginity through the Virgin Mary, and you were talking about the rings. I don't know what other experiences you guys have had. I've grown up in a system where women were taught to be very submissive and very silent. Have you guys experienced any sexism or anything like that in your religious practice?
Not in my religious practice. They're actually there's a whole chapter in the book about being very sexual and how it's okay to have sex and just do this, all the sexual things, as long as you're being safe.
That
I
sounds
remember
very.
in like Sunday school when I was doing like catechism and all these other things, like the women and men, like the boys and girls were separated. Like you had an all girls class and then you had an all boys class. And then eventually you guys would come together and like compare what you learned from each other. And it was like a very weird thing to like be a part of, right?
Mm.
And they really, really like emphasize on virtue and virginity. And they said like sex is totally wrong. It's disgusting. It's horrible. It devalues you basically as a woman the more you have it. And then the guys were kind of like, they never had any of that. They would talk about like just Jesus, like whatever Jesus was or whoever he was. And it was just like really, you know, it's like, it's not okay, I think.
How did you deal with that? It bothered you.
I'm okay with it because, you know, like that's how it is in my household, you know? Like Hispanics are normally like with women are kind of like seen and not heard rather than like having a voice or whatever. Like your opinion definitely does not matter. And it's kind of like, well, that's the norm here, you know? So I was like, all right.
That's interesting. That's normal. It feels okay to you because that's what society sort of says to you as well. Like it feels just normal.
That's what feels normal to me.
Okay.
Yeah,
I can understand it feeling normal. Does it ever bother you though? Do you ever feel like you've got something to say or you need to be heard and you can't quite get it out?
Well, no, because I feel like serving is kind of that thing. It's like, oh, who cares how I feel when I can worry about somebody else's feelings? You know what I mean?
Right. I do know what you mean. I don't think that that's always a healthy way to be. I think sometimes our own needs have to be acknowledged as well. But I certainly agree that I often experience that instead of thinking about myself, serving other people.
Mm-hmm. But isn't that like a normal thing though? Like you're supposed to be the nurturer and whatever. And
I think normal depends on who you are and your own identity, whether you're male or female. I think a lot of men could choose to be nurturers if that's their gift. So I don't think normal is divided into male and female roles, as in the females. I think that it's more universal than that. So I would say what's normal for me is where I feel comfortable, where I feel my gifts lie, and where I want to serve other people, but I want to acknowledge my own identity and my own skills.
Oh, that's so... I don't know, like, what do you mean your own identity? Like your own type of, like, who you want to be?
Who I want to be and who I am. For example, I'm good at talking. I've got lots of strong opinions, and I don't want to be in a place... I think that I can serve the world by giving those opinions and by sharing them.
But isn't that like too much freedom? Like, don't you think that would like leave you up to thinking, like having the freedom to like think freely and expressing yourself freely? Wouldn't that be really bad?
I think that it would be a really good thing. I think having freedom of thought and freedom of belief and freedom of expression, I think they're extremely important things about being human. whether you're a man or a woman, whatever your faith system. I think it's